Hello everyone, welcome back to my channel, and today I'm reviewing this Paul Rubens brand new HaiYa oil pastels. Well, what am I saying it's brand new? Because Paul Rubens already have a lot of different oil pastels and they're well known, but this year 2023 they released the new sticks, and I will show you what is different and why they decided to upgrade. So this is the biggest 72 color set, and for me, when I do acrylic painting or gouache, I prefer smaller sets because I like mixing colors. But when we talk about pencils or oil pastels, I really love bigger sets because I love working with layers, and it's not as easy to mix colors with pastel in general, so I really prefer just to grab the stick and work with it. And this is the perfect occasion, the 72 colors that I can have here. So what else about the Paul Rubens? This is a brand that is produced in China with imported pigments, and they kind of accumulated the knowledge from traditional oil painters from Europe, and implemented it with their own vision and how oil pastels should be done and what is it to have a good quality oil pastels. And now they're producing it in China. So they are making it in China not because it's cheaper to produce there, but because the brand is actually Chinese, and you can see there is all the wording in Chinese and English as well. So let's dig in. What we have here is a little leaflet that tells you about the different colors depending on which set you have. The smallest set is 24 colors and the biggest, like I have, is 72 colors. And yes, that's the one I have. I will show you all the colors in a second. And of course, it's just the general information how the pastels can be used and how the sets look like. What I really like when I open the set, I see this color chart that you can do, and it's on very nice thick white paper. And normally you do it for all your paints, all your like markers, paint pens, pastels, I don't know, everything that comes in a few colors. You are doing usually color mixing charts and swatches, and this is great like thought about artists and painters because we will do that, and the brand already printed and put this sheet right here for you, so you can just color each square and have already your color chart. What I would wish that the colors would be not just the pigment number, the color number, but also written maybe in English, because as much as I understand that this is a Chinese brand, I do not read Chinese, and I will just put the names in English on top of each color for me to navigate it easily. But in a second, I will start filling in this color chart and we will start testing the colors. But first, let's have a look at the set itself. This is beautiful. The colors, some colors are just drew my attention to them, like this color. This is a purple color, but just look at it, how it is beautiful. It is very beautiful. And the like yellow, green, this is also a beautiful color, like a turquoise green. Let's see, direct green. Different blues, different purples, different yellows, reds, a lot of neutral colors for us. So it will be great for landscaping and for portraits, and of course all the color range of the color wheel that you would imagine for yourself. Now let's go back to the stick itself. As I said, this is the new version. HaiYa is the new series from Paul Rubens, and what's new about it is we have this new design for the stick. It's easier to grip, it's a little bit smaller than the previous Paul Rubens pastels, and it also has this bullet shaped head. Of course, it's easier to draw with a bullet shaped head than with like a head like this, because it's a smoother application. And also we know that some professional brands like Sennelier have the same shape of the stick. What else? The sticks now have a paper sleeve that has all the important information about each and every color, and we have here the name of the color. I hope my camera can see it. So yes, on the paper sleeve we have a name of the color and the number, light fastness 3 stars, the opacity square, name of the pigments used. For example, here for this purple they used red and white pigment, and also the paper sleeve has dotted areas where you can unwrap it for easy use and just carefully and nicely rip it off when you're painting and the pastel shrinks in its size. What I wished for, this is great because the information actually about pastel pigments and colors I don't really see often on the sticks. Most brands do not put any information about pigment, about its opacity and light fastness on the stick. It's more it's more of the paints tradition to put the information on the tube, and it's a sort of sign of a professional approach to the art medium. So this is really, really great, but I wished for a better maybe design of the paper sleeve, because for example here with this ultramarine blue I can barely see what's written here. I would wish for maybe a slightly bigger font, and maybe think again about how to make the paper sleeves more readable, because it is a little bit too small, the font, and sometimes it can be a little bit confusing. What are we looking at? Of course, like, it depends also on the color. For the gray color, it's super easy to read and it's nice, and I can see all the letters on the signs, all the labels that the brand put on. But with purple or with blues, with darker colors, it's harder to read them. Also, what I noticed, because I already opened the set and I did not yet test the colors, we will do it in a second, but what I noticed, for example, the purple that I just had in my head, I think you may see it, and also this yellow, they are very oily. Even the paper is oily, and this ultramarine blue is another example of a very, very oily stick. But it's not all of them, it's just a few colors that I saw. For example, that gray that I already took once, it is not oily at all. It's just nice, soft, smooth, and dry, as much as the oil pastel can be. Also, there is like a light inconvenience with the box where you can see that some colors, they got a little bit damaged by, I don't know, during transportation, I guess. And some of the colors are left on the borders. In my case, it's still okay, I don't mind it, but if there was any issues, or if you are planning to move the box and either take it with you and move it around, you may face some issues, and just be careful, be gentle. This is a fragile piece and a box, and don't really toss it around. I also would like to compare them to different pastels that I have. For example, the shape, we already discussed that this is a new design and it's closer to professional oil pastels, while the cheap oil pastels like Pentel and mid-range, same as Paul Rubens Sakura Craypas Expressionist pastels, they have this regular stick sizes, just of a different size. The Paul Rubens sticks there, I think they're 1.1 centimeters diameter, so it's closer to regular stick that we used to. Pentels are cheap, they're quite waxy, and they are much smaller than Sakura. And even if we touch it, you can see that the Pentel is waxy. It's not creamy, it's not soft, it's hard. And Sakura, it's softer, much more softer than Pentel, and the softest is of course Paul Rubens' softest and creamiest. Even just by touching it, you can feel that it feels like an expensive lipstick. Very nice to touch, very creamy, very soft. And also what I was telling you about the paint or the paper sleeve, that Pentel doesn't have any information whatsoever. And Sakura Craypas, they only have the general information, where it's made, that it's non-toxic, and the color, and that's it. Regarding the safety of pastels, oil pastel in general is safe and non-toxic, but also Paul Rubens they go an extra mile, and they make sure that they use eco and environment-friendly materials, and these sticks and these oil pastels are absolutely non-toxic and safe to use. Of course, just because this is a stick of just 1 centimeter, they're not recommended for children as any other oil pastels, but for adults, they're absolutely safe to use. They have no odor, they do not release any harmful chemicals, and also they're safe for our planet, unlike, for example, like acrylic or oil paints or the solvents. Of course, if you use solvent like turpentine or any other chemical-based, solvent-based medium with oil pastels to mix them or to apply them, this is already a different case, because the medium can be not completely safe, but the pastel itself is non-toxic and safe for use. The application is extremely smooth and creamy, and it's the coverage, now we're testing it on paper, right? The coverage is great, it's full and total coverage. They're not streaky, there is no oil being separated, there's no inconvenience in using them. And we will see if all colors are consistent in performance and in coverage and in their workability. So as I don't know the Chinese pronunciation and what colors does that say, I base my choice on the number, and later on I will just write down the name of the colors in English. As you can see, some colors may crumble a little bit. I think it's because some of them are not very consistent in their shape. I think you can see here, right? It's not, there is like a little hole here, so that may happen. Little crumble may happen on the point like that when I touch it with the painting surface. But other than that, they do not feel waxy. They do not feel fragile in the hand, like they're gonna break any other second. No, they feel very nice to use. Now I'm just gonna go ahead and fill all the squares and speed up the video, and I'll get back to you soon. Okay, the color chart is done. You can see all the beautiful colors, all 72 colors. So what are my observations? There are colors that are labeled as like opaque or semi-opaque, semi-transparent, but they look on paper somehow like not covering it as creamy, as fully as for example brown shades. These brown shades are just perfect and beautiful, but for example this, let's just see what's going on here. Let's see, this is 037, this is raw sienna, and it's marked as a semi-transparent, semi-opaque. Okay, I can see that, it makes sense. The next Venetian red, I guess it's marked as opaque, makes sense, beautiful color. The next color is red brown, also opaque, beautiful, looks amazing, gorgeous. And this is brown madder, also is semi-opaque. So I guess when you look at the like this at the color chart, the better coverage will also mean better opacity, versus like less covered area on paper will mean like semi-transparent, semi-opaque color, and closer to transparency than to opacity, which makes sense to me. And also in general, I felt like the browns, the grays, and the yellows are so much creamier and thicker. They are just literally like you're painting with lipstick. It goes so smooth, and I can already think of some landscapes with where you want some of the marks to be visible, and those are beautiful. While some reds and some greens, actually most of the greens, they are quite transparent. Based on what we have here, for example, this green it's a green yellow, it's quite transparent, and most of them are quite transparent. So I'm not sure how they're gonna work in landscapes, and we will see, because I will do a test drawing, a test painting. Some of the colors are just, I'm just in love with them. These browns I already told you, the grays I already also told you, but this blue, I'll pull it up, it's a pale blue opaque color. It's just beautiful. And next to it, the colors are ash blue and tallow blue. They are beautiful. They are so creamy, so soft. If that would be lipstick, I would buy that lipstick. It's just very beautiful, very satisfying, very nice. Regarding to some of the sticks that I was telling you in the beginning that they were quite oily, I think there are around 10 sticks out of 72 that are quite oily. It does not really affect the grip. I had no issues with it, but it does affect like the general feeling of it, because afterwards you want to wipe your hands, you want to wash your hands, and it's like it just adds slight annoyance, slight inconvenience to the experience, but it does not break them. There's no oil trace on the paper, there's no oil dripping, of course, and it does not affect, as I said, the grip. And yeah, that's about it. One thing though that I noticed, and I think it's just the process of producing such a fine art medium, is that, for example, my Prussian blue had a little extra in it. It has a little extra in it, and it just makes the grip not ideal, because there is this bump and there is nothing else inside, so it's just a little bit weird. Yeah, but that's how they were cut and shaped. I don't think it's a big problem, but just keep an eye on it, just in case it will affect somehow your grip and your performance. I also think that to increase the opacity of certain colors, and also when the color is like smoother and nicer, I think what I observed is that this pigment, because right on the paper slip we can see what pigments were used, this color were using white in it. So it was the color of whatever, blue, yellow, green, red mixed with white, which is also a practice in painting. You can add white to increase the opacity of a certain color. And I will, when I will write down the review that I also will link in the description, I will thoroughly check each of 72 colors. I'm not doing it right now, but you can also check it later in the article. I will see if the opacity of the colors and how they are creamy and nice in application is like related to white being in it, which is nothing wrong with it. As I said, white is a regular method to make a color more opaque or opaque. And yeah, that's just my observation in terms of what I see on paper sleeves and what I see in application on paper. And of course, when we work with oil pastel, we should remember that they will not dry. They will not dry on this color swatch. They will not dry in the box. Even those that are oily or have oily surface, I will have to wipe them because they will not dry. And if you want your art to be stored somewhere, you want to display it, and you want to somehow clean it afterwards, you need to frame it with glass or use some sort of fixative that are very okay with being used on oil pastels, because you cannot just brush on an acrylic varnish over it. So yes, just keep in mind that they will not dry, not on paper, not on canvas, not in the box, like in no way applied they will dry. Regarding the opacity of the colors, I updated my color chart. I added all the details from the paper sleeves above the colors, because Chinese names I cannot read, and I also wanted to have all the pigments used visible, because it can be useful for mixing, or if I'm looking for a special shade or tint in layering, it may be important to know what other undertones are in specific color to make a wise choice. I also noticed that some paper sleeves I think have some tiny typos, which is not a big deal, of course. Just be careful, read and think what makes sense, what does not make sense. And other than that, it's pretty straightforward, and I proceeded to test the opacity. I just drew some lines with a black Sharpie and tested all the colors, like to see which is the true opacity and transparency, and if the opacity and transparency matches what is written on the paper sleeve. For example, I normally, even in painting, in acrylic paints or watercolor or gouache or whatever, yellows and some reds and some lighter greens, they are normally quite transparent, which is why I was surprised that these yellows most of them were labeled as opaque. And when I tested them on over the black line, I don't really see them being opaque or even semi-opaque. They are semi-transparent and closer to transparent, and it does make sense that the colors that have a white in it, for example Naples yellow and buff, they seem more opaque just because they're mixed with white. But single pigmented colors, for example all the yellows, they are based on the same pigment but different ratio, different concentration between other elements in the color, and we can see that they have pretty much same transparency. They're semi-transparent in my opinion, and the same goes for some reds and some greens, but reds and greens, they are labeled on the paper sleeves like semi-transparent or completely transparent, like Chinese orange, for example. And when we see it on the test, yes, it is transparent, semi-transparent. I would not call any of the colors though completely transparent, which is great because we will most likely use oil pastels for layering, and we needed to cover somehow the layer underneath, even though it will let it through and like create depth and like additional color vibrancy, or will mute the color. So I think even though it has some differences between what's written on the paper sleeve and what's in actuality are the opacities and transparencies of the colors, it doesn't really matter, because at the end of the day my test shows that most of the colors are very opaque, very nice. They have thick application, and some of the colors that you would expect naturally based on the pigment to be transparent, they are semi-transparent, which is fine, and I'm pretty satisfied with colors. I wanted just to quickly compare Craypas Sakura oil pastels with Paul Rubens pastels. I have a portrait set of Craypas, so they are a limited palette, and I'll try to find similar colors in Paul Rubens set to test them. For example, here I have burnt sienna. You can definitely tell that Sakura is much harder and much less softer and less creamier than Paul Rubens. So it was burnt sienna, and I'm going for the burnt sienna here. I need this one, 036, and we can see that Paul Rubens is so much thicker, deeper, more opaque. The coverage is so much greater, and of course the camera does not do justice to colors, but when you will make your swatches, you will see that Sakura is thinner, is lighter, is not at all as creamy and as thick as Paul Rubens. And the coverage, this is watercolor paper. We don't really normally use oil pastels or watercolor paper, which we can of course do, but you can see how different it is. And let's see any other colors. I want to see some light ones that I can match. Naples yellow, for example. This is Sakura. This is much better application. And then burnt sienna, and this is Paul Rubens. Again, I think that Paul Rubens has a better, smoother, creamier texture to it, and better coverage and easier coverage. It took me 2 seconds to cover this area, and it took me a little bit more because I had to press harder when applying Sakura Craypas oil pastels. But what I can also see that the colors are different. Of course, it will go down to what pigments they use, where these pigments come from, are they natural, are they synthetic pigments, what other additives a paint color has, and so on and so forth. But it's also something to keep in mind, and why we need to do the swatches, because colors from set to set, from brand to brand, from medium to medium can be completely different. Thus, please do the swatches, do not ignore them, and do some tests before you will paint. Okay, we're done with this. Now let's see how we can use Paul Rubens oil pastels with different basic techniques. Of course, I will not go over all oil pastel techniques, but some of the basic techniques. Let's see how performant Paul Rubens HaiYa oil pastels will be. Alright, let's test quickly, without going into much details, some basic techniques that we can use and that we will use with oil pastels. It's blending, scraping, scratching the paint, and layering. Let's start with blending. Normally what we do is we press hard, and then we go and we press lighter and lighter and lighter and lighter, and the color goes to white, right? And from this side we press harder, we press harder, we press harder, and then eventually we press lighter and lighter and lighter. And of course we can always use our finger to smooth it out and make it nicer and smoother, and maybe more intense, add some color around. So okay, blend in red to, no, it's not that red, I think it's like magenta, ruby red, yes, to white. Done, easy, in few seconds, it works beautifully. Let's try more colors, right? Let's just try 3 colors, also ruby red, some orange, yellow deep, and white, of course. Oh, forgot to clean the white. And with oil pastels, we're always overlapping. That's why I was saying that the fact that they're semi-transparent, some colors are amazing because we will have to do some blending and some layering. And as you can see, blending is very easy. I did not do it perfectly. I just wanted to see if it works. As you can see, from one color to white and using 3 different colors, the blending is very easy, smooth, and the coverage stays amazing, even though I'm working now on watercolor paper. Let's see how it will work with graffito, with some scratching. So I'll do a layer of red, ruby red is very nice, and then I'll do like a dark ultramarine blue to cover it. Now let's see what we can have, and I can use the just a palette knife. Yeah, it works amazing, it works beautiful. We can do shapes, we can do, yeah, I think it's very nice. You will layer some greens and yellows, you can do some nice grass. Perfect. Let's move on to some layering. And for layering, I will take some blue again, just go do a very abstract drawing, just to see how it works together, layering darker and lighter colors one on top of each other, how they create these light mixes. And of course we can always take a palette knife and scrape a little bit of paint and apply it directly on paper, on the canvas, creating some effects and some flowers, for example, some highlights. And as you can see, it works amazing with Paul Rubens Pastels. And in general, just want to show that they are very nice for palette knife use. And you can of course always try to mix them like that, using first a palette knife and then applying it on your painting. So yeah, in terms of performance and possibilities for different techniques, I am pretty sure that every beginner will appreciate how versatile Paul Rubens, the brand new HaiYa version is, because what we most of the times do, we slightly blend the colors so they can either create a nice gradient or slightly mix one over another. We definitely use a lot of layering with oil pastels, and sometimes we scratch the surface, we scratch the paint. So that's why I tested only these few techniques. Of course you can use any other techniques with Paul Rubens Pastels, because if it works for basics, it will work for something more advanced, because even a more advanced technique, it will have in its base either layering or blending or some sort of combining different techniques and tools that we can use with Paul Rubens Pastels. Now let me finally make a small art piece with this amazing 72 colors. Oh, and I almost forgot, before I will proceed to actually join painting something with this oil pastels, I wanted to address how lightfast these pastels are. So when we look at the paper sleeve, this is probably the first pastels that will mention the light fastness. Most of them have 3 stars and some have 2 stars, which means pretty good resistance to fading. But light fastness is only resistance to fading. Do not generalize it, and do not think that these are pastels that will withstand like rubbing or water or whatever. They will not, because pastels are very fragile, and you need to really think how you will keep your artwork safe, how you will care for it, because even remember the test that we did on opacity of the colors, it will definitely stamp on the other page. This is just the cover, so I don't really care. And this is also shows you that you cannot stack together the oil pastel paintings. And if this happens, it's not just that this piece of paper will be with some pastel marks, but it also means that the colors from the original area where the colors were applied will be lifted, and it will be just like a hole there with no color. So please consider that oil pastels in general are not durable. They are not water resistant, they're not scratching resistant, they're not rubbing resistant, and they are not like time resistant. So yes, they are light fast, and the colors will stay vibrant over time, but there is still a lot of things that can affect the painting and that can destroy it. Even simple dust will of course attach easily on oily surface of oil pastels, and how you're going to clean it. So yes, I will emphasize it again, please. If you're using the beautiful pastels like Paul Rubens or Sennelier or any others, you need to think how you will protect the finished painting and how you will protect the other areas and the other paintings from touching with oil pastels. So yeah, now let's move on to some painting tests. Here I have a beautiful set of pastel paper, and when I'm saying beautiful, it's because this set has different tinted papers, because I'm mostly using acrylic paints, so I will probably not use like 40 sheets of yellow tinted or rose tinted paper, but I may use it for oil pastels sometimes. So I'm just gonna use now a few tinted papers, and I'll show you what we can do. Okay, let's say we have some still life exercises, and you can have a banana, an orange, a peach. The peach is probably one of the most beautiful because they have such a gradient of color on them, or a pear, or even an apple, or grapes, whatever. It will work. You can just try and test your still life skills, your light and shadowing skills. And I'm just using this because it's a simple and small object. I can quickly and very loosely sketch to see how I'm comfortable with working with the pastels. And I will be testing with Paul Rubens or oil pastels to quickly sketch this apple. I don't know, I think I will put it on like a narrower side, and of course I'm considering that my eyes looking at it and how the sun goes from the window, where's the highlight and the light area and where's the shadow area. And I'll probably put something underneath it so I can also kind of see the shadow, even though I can't imagine it, but yes, like that. I can see the shadow. Of course I can paint it from the top, from the sides, from whatever angle I want, and it will of course affect the shading, the lights and highlights. And as I said, you can do as detailed as you wish, and you don't even have to follow the colors as closely as they are on the apple, because it is a sketch. It is something that we do for fun. So I remember seeing here like a Venetian red. I will try to make like this shape first of this apple, and I'm kind of looking at my camera screen because I want to paint it from the top to see what shape it is. So I'm just loosely painting it, and it may be not perfect, and we can see the cast shadow and then like the softer parts of it, and there's the center here, and the lightest part is somewhere here. Okay, I'll just try and do it. And I chose pastel, as I already told you, pastel paper, and I'm just trying different colors because also this is my first time using these colors, and then I need to feel them. I need to make sure I understand how they work. The stem is almost like yellow brown, because on the light side of course it will be kind of yellow. And this is shorter blending. I think this is too light probably. And this Chinese orange, yeah, maybe Chinese orange will be better. And as you saw, I even added a little bit of like purpley color. It was Bordeaux from the set because I want the shadow to have the vibrancy. And as you can see, you can even blend the colors directly on the paper. And I also want to stop for now and see where the light areas are, and I want to quickly go over them with like a yellow to just have that in my mind, so I don't go over them with too much of red, because I won't be able to cover the red with yellow otherwise. And we can also see that the apple is not perfectly red, right? It has like this yellow parts everywhere, some dots. And I'm not trying to make it perfect, as I already said. Just trying to make it work as much as I think it should work. So I'm just taking orange color to put on the outside of the lighter area. Which one is this? This is a red light, and you don't see it, but I have here my color chart on top, so I look at it to see what colors looked like on the swatch, so I can see if that will really work for me or not really. So yeah, I'm just going over, trying to mix some other colors to see how it's gonna work, what it's gonna have. And of course, when you work with tinted paper, you can always leave like a negative space and let it come out. I'm using the gray paper because it will be a great contrast with a red apple. But for example, if I would be using pink paper, I can leave some areas completely without any pigment, and the pink will go through and it will add some elements to my apple. I think I need more purple on that big area. It will also help me make the dynamic, the shape, and just very loosely. You can have like a shadow here that goes a little there, and you can always, of course, work it with your fingers to make it soft, or to even blend the colors, because the cast shadows and shadows on that side of the apple, on the darker side of the apple, they do have softer edges. The stem also has a white area on top, but I'm not using white, I'm using gray, just to see how it will work out. And where I'm using white, it's on that area of highlight. Like here, right, where I know that it is pretty white. Here. But you can also see that here it's also the light, and here, so I think the areas are pretty accurate. And of course, because these pastels are very soft, you can always make it like a little swirls and add the texture to it. So it's not just a flat color, it has a texture almost like an oil painting brushstroke texture, if you know what I mean. So it will have a looser shape, but it will have some character. And of course, you can blend it in as much as you want. You can let it be loose and somehow transparent, or you can blend it pretty to like one solid surface, one solid color. I'm doing something in between. Just want to have more even coverage of everything. All right. Yeah, and that's it. And this is how we can use that for still life. I will try to show you a little bit closer. I could have gone darker with colors and making them more purple, but I went with the more red palette, and you can see a closer look to see the details and the colors, how they mix, how these details, you see what I was talking about, a more like expressive application, and the highlights, and how you can mix and blend with your finger. Yes, so this is an easy, pretty easy sketch you can do, and this is also demonstrates how it's pretty easy to work with oil pastels, with Paul Rubens oil pastels, with such to be honest, complex thing, because lights and shadows and still life and some realistic objects, they're not as easy to draw and paint as like abstract or using it as a mixed media, or even not as easy as landscapes, because landscapes can be also very loose and can be played on contrast and on very thick strokes, while apple also can be with wide strokes, of course, but yet it is something not very easy to do. So as you can see with Paul Rubens, you can master it, and yeah, don't be afraid to test them and to experiment with them. And next I will try to paint, to draw something even more like bigger, more appealing, more complex. Like I think I will try to paint a landscape. Let's see how it goes. Now I will try to use the Paul Rubens oil pastels to paint, to draw something more complex, or something like that covers the whole paper, and I chose quite simple landscape. I will make sure that the image is somewhere in the small corner here, so you can also use it as a reference if you will follow along, or just so you know what am I talking about when I'm saying I'm blending here or there, and you can have the idea of what I'm doing. So as we can see, what I'm about to paint has a big blended sky and sort of subdued colored mountains. And I already told you that I like to use this pastel paper because it comes in different tints. And if for apple I was using the gray paper, for this landscape I will use the pink color. It's called rose color because firstly it will enhance the colors of the sky, and also even though some colors may be more transparent and allow the paper color to show through even mountains color, I think it will create that warmth of that sunset light that I think will be beneficial for the landscape overall. And I'll just do a quick rough, very rough sketch, because I don't want to have hard pencil marks on my paper, but I just want to see where is what, so I can navigate the paper. I have it printed, but my printer will not do justice to these colors, so I will just try to experiment and to combine colors that I see fit for this idea. And I can always have a second paper, preferably of the same tone, because of course on the white and on the rose paper the color will appear different. And I just want to see some colors that I may use or may not use, and see how they look on pink paper. Well, for a roughly painting, drawing with like no preparation whatsoever, and first time using a specific art medium, I'd say, and of course I'm not an oil pastels like world-renowned artist, so for me as also a beginner in art pastels, I think I found that the coverage is not very consistent between opaque and transparent colors, and also they work very well with blending with fingers. But somehow, maybe because I picked their like pastel toned landscape, I'm not sure, but I struggled a little bit to find good colors that will match. Although I have like 10 blues and 3 different pinks and pink beige colors, I still struggled to find a good balance for the skies as well. Of course, it may be just my skill, or maybe the color chart could have been worked better, because when we look at the color chart, we think, oh, the pinks will work nice, but somehow they didn't really, and maybe I just should go over it and make it more like a textured painting than very smooth, because I like smooth paintings when the colors blended smoothly. But of course it can be also that I'm just lacking some techniques in oil pastels, and if I would be layering them in a different manner, that would work much better. I still think I am very satisfied for the first time using this Paul Rubens oil pastels HaiYa set on pastel paper. I think they worked quite well. I just want to remove the tapes to show you the painting closer, and also to think how it turned out. I think it turned out pretty well. I like how I can, with a pastel, with a palette knife, apply highlights on mountains and on skies if needed. I also like that I could blend and then make like a blended background for my painting, and then go back and create more texture with a thicker application, with a harder pressure. And I think for blending, mixing colors, as you saw, so easy to apply a few colors in thin layers without heavy pressure and blend them in a completely different color, which I liked a lot. I still don't like this blue because it's I think transparent. I think it was either cobalt blue or ultramarine blue, probably ultramarine blue. Yes, I think it was ultramarine blue. It's said to be semi-transparent, but I'm just not sure. With thin application, it does not really work. You need to make it a thicker application, I guess, like a more expressive brushstrokes. And I like it because I do abstract art, and for me, expressive brushstrokes are important. And I really love how the sky turned out and how the main kind of mountain turned out, and I played around with some colors to figure out how it will work. So yes, going back to what else I made, we made this apple and we made this landscape with this HaiYa, I think it's the correct pronunciation, set. Let's start to like draw some sort of a conclusion on what we saw. First, I think that this is a mid-range, probably one of the creamiest and most buttery, and our closest competitor from mid-range for Sennelier sort of oil pastels, because they are super buttery, they are super creamy, they are super buttery, very creamy, they layer on paper beautifully, they blend easily, they mix easily. So for the beginner, what else do you want? Most important for us, it's mixing and blending and layering, possibilities to use the oil pastels, because it's one of the most used techniques we're gonna absolutely use in our paintings. And of course the performance, as we saw in still life, as we saw in landscape, performance even for beginner, which I am, I think, in oil pastels specifically, are great. The color range is amazing. There are so many colors I love. I was telling you about the blues that I absolutely love, the pinks, the pale pinks, pastels, I love them. The grays and browns are just beautiful, and some of the mixed blues, blue greens are also absolutely beautiful, and 72 colors, you can do anything. You saw that I was pretty much picking just the ready to go colors, and sometimes blending for smaller nuances in colors, and like better fitting and matching the reference photo. And so overall, I think for the money, for like around 40, I think, to $50, the 72 colors that will be on Amazon, and maybe around $46-45 on their official website, you need to check for yourself the accurate price. I think this is probably one of the best pastels to start with. Then if you have money, if you can afford it, and of course if oil pastels something that you do daily, you may think of investing more than $100 in a set of pastels, but to begin with, I don't think we are ready to sacrifice that amount of money. So then these pastels will be absolutely beautiful to work with. As I said, the colors are beautiful. What I was telling you earlier about some sticks being oily, definitely it may be because I have a hotter climate, I think tropical climate where I am, so some sticks may be more oily, and of course it's also because the composition will depend on specific colors. As I said, it does not affect anyhow the performance, and you saw I was using some oily sticks because the blue is oily, but you saw that there was no impact of that oiliness on the performance, so it's just the fill, and that's it pretty much. What I think is that some colors are somehow more buttery than the others, and you can see it by how easy the bullet shaped head can be smooshed. For example, this is two different colors, and I believe this blue is creamier, and we can see it's super buttery when we apply it, and this green does not, the head does not spread it easily, and it's not as opaque, and it's not as creamy and buttery as the blue. So I think it also, the creaminess, the butteriness depends on specific pigments used and specific colors, but overall most of them, like 90, as you can see even by the heads how they're already being used by me, most of the heads are very creamy and soft, and some colors, because maybe they're more transparent, they're also less buttery, less creamy. That does not affect performance, but it does affect the coverage, especially if you're working with a tinted paper. So when you will work with this green that I just showed you, that is less buttery than that blue, the coverage will be very different. Let's try in that corner with green and with blue. I am using absolutely the same amount of pressure, but you can see how the coverage will be different depending on opacity, transparency of the color, and of course also on how buttery it is and creamy it is. I absolutely love the new design. As we also discussed, right, the normal usual sticks, regular sticks for oil pastels, they have the same top and bottom, but this one have bullet heads. I think it is very, very, very comfortable to paint with, especially to start painting with it and to have an even coverage. I think it benefits us as artists in doing so. I also think that it's great that they put all the information on the sleeves, because if I wouldn't know that this color is transparent compared to this one, semi-transparent, I would think that something is wrong with that stick, why it's not as creamy and doesn't cover as opaquely as this one. But I know that this is more transparent than this one, so for me it's just an information how to layer these colors and how to pick the papers, and maybe how to also press on a specific stick. So I think that's about it. Some inconvenience, I would not call them something really important, like disadvantages that affect, as I said, a lot performance. They do not. As I said also about for the painting, you need to be mindful about what colors are transparent. So maybe what I should have done for this semi-transparent blue, I should have probably layered gray, because grays are quite transparent here, and even if they are like using transparent pigments, still layered very opaquely on paper. So I probably should have layered gray first and then go over with some dark blue to make sure the coverage is better for my liking, but for your liking it may be absolutely perfect. For Apple, I had absolutely zero issues. It was a beautiful still life exercise for me, so I hope you enjoyed my lengthy and wordy review. If you used already previous version of Paul Rubens oil pastels or this new version, please let me know in comments what do you think, or if you haven't used it and will use in the future, please share what paintings or what drawings you've done. And yeah, I wish you a very creative week, and see you next time with another review or useful video.